I would like to introduce Zvi Herman to come and make his presentation.
Good morning. It's really a pleasure and honor to meet you all here. I was just looking around when you present yourself. There is an Everest of knowledge and experience around in this gathering, and really I'm honored together with Edo, and I'm pleased to join Edo because we started this last year, that we join forces, we go around, speak about BAD and about agriculture and cooperation between the two countries. So I'm really pleased to be here. I even don't know where to start. A little bit to touch immediately on Uzbekistan, that funnily, or any other of countries that you mentioned, because I've been here, been in these countries, and it always brings me back, including Croatia, by the way. There's a lot of business there. Let me bring you, first of all, greetings on behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture of Israel and Rural Development that I'm representing here in the US and in Canada and Mexico. And as Bob was saying, I just got back from a formal visit with my Minister of Agriculture, Orit Noked. We went to Mexico, but in another way, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, and then Mexico. And we were actually meeting all ministers of agriculture. And the base really is, how do we cooperate together? And in particular, somebody was mentioning here, food safety, food security. But I would say food security. I think to share with you that all the meetings and the differences between the three countries, and I've been with my minister at the same time also in China and in India, but let's focus to your neighbor. I think it's a very clear message that I can share with you now, that be it a small country or be it a big country, I think agriculture and food security is on the top of the agenda on all of the ministers of the countries and organizations that we have met. I think everybody is dealing with it. And of course the big question is, how are we going to deal with it seriously? Because this is a kind of a mixed group, and our purpose here, I would say, is two or three because I was asked to speak. One, to introduce to you Israel's agriculture, and mainly to launch next year's International Agriculture Exhibition in Israel, which this is the brochure, and you'll see a short movie. It's called Agritech, Agri and Technology, and it's well known around the world. That's one purpose. I'll come to it in a minute. And the other one is really the BAD, which today is everything comes from science and comes from innovation. And the question was, in a business way, I'm going back to the meetings, how do we go about? I think what we presented and what we are saying, there is a big window of opportunity in the field of food security. And it's really, I think it's huge. And everybody looks at it in a different way. Depends on the country, depends on its resources. On the other hand, because we are talking about local food supply and also exporting, because everyone wants to export, my observation is, and particularly it comes from the US and also from the European market, which, if we go to Israel, these are the two big markets for our part is Europe, is more and more regulations are in the system. It means it is much more difficult to take a high-quality product from Mexico or from Israel and put it into the more developed markets. And I think these two issues, in a way, were on the table. On one hand, the big opportunity and the actual need for food security. And I'm not mentioning now Africa and other countries, which is a different. But let's say food supply, even if we say to the more sophisticated markets. At the same time, there is the problem or the issue that you have to deal is with food safety or regulations. And it looks like there are two ways that we are looking at that you can tackle. One is really to bring in technology at the production, at the farm gate, at the post-harvest level, in order to take that food from emerging markets, or for that matter, for any market, into the demand area. And secondly, to train and to transfer knowledge in order to overcome that gap. And I would say that, and Edo, you can correct me or you can jump in any time. I think Israel as a small state, I think we have done that all the time. And maybe I'm not going in a very orderly manner. Before I became a diplomat, and I live in Israel in a farm, I'm second or third generation for farming, grew up on a dairy farm. But my recent post was, I was the director of Israel's International Development Cooperation Center, which is part of the Ministry of Agriculture, and together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is actually sharing Tikkun Olam, if in Hebrew, doing a better world. We are sharing actually our knowledge, or cooperating rather, and sharing our knowledge in capacity building and technology transfer. I mean, so this, in a way, puts together the big opportunities with how to do it. And whether we are going to organic agriculture and urban agriculture, as you mentioned, which is also a big topic today, or rural, urban agriculture, or we go to the commercial side. That's what we are doing. I will stop for a minute here, and I would like to share with you a short movie which depicts Israel's agriculture vis-a-vis this exhibition, and then we'll make either discussion or some additional points. I'm pushing this.
At NASA Research Lab, leading Israeli companies are playing a key role in the development of controlled air pressure departments and how it may be possible to influence certain plant behaviors to meet the needs of future agriculture. Meanwhile, farmers on the planet.
That's it. I put it max.
Israel's outstanding precision agriculture know-how and experience. Harness computers to overcome water shortage and provide exact temperature and irrigation control with plant sensing techniques and data interpretation. Utilize the internet for remote monitoring of growing plants in real time. Apply state-of-the-art organic growth methods, extend produce shelf life, and cut shipping costs. And receive up to 500 tons of high-quality tomatoes direct there. Whether it's vegetables, poultry, or dairy farming, every parameter is computerized and can be remotely monitored and controlled. Electronic recognition of the food centers enables exact composition of food and supplements. Sensors placed in the milking pipes analyze the milk's content and enable an accurate assessment of the animal's condition. A new world record has been set at the Open Cow competition, an average of 12,500 liters per cow annually. Israel's climate and ongoing lack of water led to distinctive and unique solutions to conserve water. Israel is a world leader in developing water-saving techniques. Low-discharge sprayers and automatic controllers are some examples for Israeli innovation for more efficient water use. Underground irrigation systems enables uniform distribution of water. It also leads to conserving water and fertilizers. Gravity-proof systems allow farmers efficient irrigation of their small family plots at rural locations without relying on pumps or electricity.
Where they're bringing their information from, Israel is on a cutting edge, obviously, of water use, in a place where there isn't a lot to go around. We've really benefited from the fact that this technology these new ideas, these new materials are coming over and getting to us here.
The water shortage in Israel has also led to the development of closed systems for both intensive fish farming and vegetable growing. The nitrogen-filled water from the fish breeding ponds is onto a biofilter. Then it is streamed into the greenhouse hydro system, where it is recharged with oxygen and directed back to the fish. Flowers account for 26% of Israel's total fresh agriculture export. This sector has become highly profitable, mainly because of the development of new growing methods and computerized storing and cutting machines.
I came to Israel to learn how to prevent diseases which attack my roses.
Israel is the source for development and production of high-quality vegetable seeds, suitable for places with shortage of water and harsh climatic conditions. New and exotic vegetable and fruit varieties have been adapted to suit the different needs and tastes of consumers worldwide. Israeli scientists have developed a unique long shelf-life tomato seed designed to meet the farmer's local conditions and market requirements.
In collaboration
We have
with
signed an agreement with an Israeli firm to develop a hope of plants for the local market.
These specifically bred bees have been carrying out maximum fertilization of plants and are doing wonders to the famous Israeli tomatoes. Israeli companies have developed highly efficient organic products designed to help the farmer fight pesticides, thus market its highly demanded organic produce at much lower cost. This is not just another tractor. This new machine will enable the sterilization of the ground without the use of hazardous methyl bromide. It's hard to believe, but these genetically sterile flies may become the new peace ambassadors for the Middle East. Israeli research team have developed a biological method to help citrus growers on both sides of the border cope with damage done by the fruit fly.
This is the first time in years that I don't have to share my citrus with those flies.
As a leading player in the world of agricultural technology and innovation, Israeli companies can provide a wide variety of advanced solutions, starting from the farmer's assessments of needs all the way to shipping and marketing. A total turnkey package or a single item. Have your pick.
came up with a very comprehensive design in a very short space of time. The product, of course, was also exactly what we were looking for.
Israel places great emphasis on international cooperation, encompassing training, joint research projects, transfer of know-how, and exchange of experts in a wide range of areas. Come grow with us and reap the benefits of the future of agriculture today.
Well, okay. Well, I'm ending this part of inviting you all. Please come to next May, 15, 17 to Israel. It's going to be a big exhibition. It's usually visited by 40 ministers and specifically the agro sector. By the way, every year there is a major theme. The exhibition is every 3 years. This year, the major theme or the theme of the subject is plastic culture. It actually indicates that agriculture is going under coverage. So the major professional topic that will be discussed, and it is invited scientists from all over the world, will be plastic culture. So that's for the exhibition. I want to come back, as Bob introduced, to the Mexican side. If we take the global picture, I would say that if we take cooperation in general, Israel focuses on the Far East, China, India, Vietnam. This would be one area. And in all these places we have bilateral kind of centers of excellence to demonstrate our own experience, sharing with India, with China, and with Vietnam, mainly in protected agriculture practices, water efficiency, and livestock, mainly in dairy. If we have time, I'll tell you a little bit of the dairy part with China and in Israel itself. It has a strong bias towards environment. Then we have, of course, Europe as a market. The US, again, cooperation, and I know that we are standing here in front of, we are in the US and we are standing in front of the US with all its capabilities and scientific and knowledge. But still, the bigger picture, the other target is Mexico, and of course Brazil, but Mexico in particular. The Minister of Agriculture that, and Bob mentioned the Minister of Agriculture of Mexico, we went there, it's in Cerro Prado, something, it's actually a similar kind of a semi-arid area, is an international, the biggest agriculture international exhibition. There was 650 companies. There was a specific Israeli pavilion with about 20 Israeli companies. And this is an ongoing affair for many years between Israel and Mexico. I think there is a lot of cooperation also with Jewish let's say, business people who were, by the way, moved from different areas, again, to the food sector. And I think, now zeroing what you were saying, I think Bob, when he told us that there is a possibility to create either a new BARD or any kind of cooperation, I think it's right. It actually came up on the table with Minister of Agriculture, saying that they are now putting together a long-term vision of agriculture as Mexico, and actually asked us to see whether we can cooperate in designing these thoughts. And we are in the process. And I think if this is possible, and you being neighbor, a research on R&D component within such a bigger umbrella is definitely, I would say, suitable, and I will take with us the challenge that you gave us. We'll see how we're doing it, but it's definitely there, and we actually have to go and formulate something with the Minister of Agriculture of Mexico. There's a presentation. I'm not sure how much time we have. I don't think we have, but I want to share with you just in broad terms what is the Israeli agriculture is doing at the moment. I think we are at 2% of the GDP, so it means it became what you call, it's an inevitable process. Like in any developing country, agriculture becomes 2, even less, like in the US. We are around 2%. But it still has, I think, beyond its percentage in the GDP, an impact on the country's, I would say, strategic overall look, being from planning to the rural areas, open spaces and all that. Economically, it's a sector of around $7.2 billion output per year, that about 25% is exported, fresh produce. And if you add to it the related technology, that's another $1.2 billion. So the agro sector altogether is handling something like $2.4, $2.5 billion, which is much bigger than the actual, just the value of the sector. I think I don't know how many of you have been in Israel, I think we are still maintaining the system of the big production methodologies or systems, which is moshavim and kibbutzim, which is family farms and the kibbutzim farm. These are the foundings, the base for production. But I think over the years, it is going more and more that you have to accumulate even the small units in order to be able to compete. So today, even if you're coming to a village, so-called, it is not anymore the typical family farm that it used to be. It's usually some kind of partnership. This is another big trend. I don't want to go deep into the research, but I think research and within the ministry is a key subject that is money put into it and a lot of looking for innovation. One of the topics that I want to share with you is automation in agriculture, and I think this is also one topic that we could share. This is mainly from the problem that we have, and I'm not going into details, that manual labor is a problem in a developed country, and in our case is very much so. So actually the chief scientist, a big part of the money is going to automation because we cannot import as much foreign labor or casual labor that we want. So that's definitely a big area. Of course, functional science, you might add to it, Edo. I think we are still working on the water issue, although I think we are quite advanced. I think there's a lot of emphasis on environmental agriculture. The consideration is how do you produce by reducing your footprint on agriculture, and we recently went through two big programs. One, a reform in the dairy sector as a big pollutant to the environment. So the whole sector went through a redesign in order to prevent the effluents going into the aquifer, which is a strategic subject. And now we are in the middle of to do the same in the poultry industry, taking in account also the what you call animal welfare is also a very, very big part of the consideration scientifically and technologically. So I would say that, one, please consider and come to Agritech. Secondly, we are very much trying to cooperate, and the embassy and myself, to see what kind of venues we can find and innovate with your government. Of course, the research part, and I think we can really join forces to see how do we tackle these big global issues of food security and environment. But at the same time, I think we also, all of us, want to do the business side and agro cooperation, which is also part of the formula. I will stop here if there are any questions or anything, and if anybody is happen to be in Washington, then please call on us. The coffee is on the house. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask if it's a trend throughout the world to get away from the small farm and go into kibbutzim or like the ejido in Mexico, or is the family plot still viable?
Well, I can say that wherever you go, by the way, as Israeli and as I was dealing with international cooperation, the kibbutz is there as a kind of an image, and everybody is asking, especially in developing countries, can we make or put up a system of a kibbutz? And I always say, this is not something that you can copy-paste. It is absolutely not possible, because you have to understand that it comes from Israel historical background and coming back to the new country of Israel and all that. So no, the interest is there. I think the small family units or the small family farms is probably one of the biggest challenges of the global agriculture sector all over the world. What will happen with the smallholder? And I can only share with you, from Africa to Central Asia to India, this is the major question. And I would say, if we are looking to the Israeli experience, I think Israel is the only country that you can come, and I'm always telling this to people who are coming, you go to a moshav, you see a farm which is, take my village, 91 farm units. They were all 4 hectare per unit. That's what you have, and about 12,000 cubic meter of water, which later on had to be reduced because of the water shortage. If you take such a unit, it is definitely not economical. not economical. It's too small nowadays. In those days, it was providing a decent income and all that, but it's not economical. So you would come today, only about 6 of the 91 in our case, and that's across the board, is they are actually full-time farmers. What they have done, they replaced the limitation of land and water with technology and buying production means from outside. That's the only way. If you go to a developing country, cooperatives were used all over the world, starting from the colonial time by the British and others, and including us. I think it is not really working. So I think that the smallholders around the globe, they are facing big challenges, and I think many of them, if the economies will grow, they will fall out of the system, and there is not where they should or they can go back to work as an alternative, because it's not so easy to move from agriculture, let's say, to industry and all that. So the challenge is global. When we discuss these matters with developing countries, the only answer we can share is taking and saying, if we can find appropriate technologies, plus proper training to the globally saying smallholder sector, they might have a chance to come into the mainstream or into the food supply system. The other thinking that we have, and again it has to be tailor-made, is if you can amalgamate smallholders and somehow link them to big agricultural, say, production farms or production businesses, that they will be a kind of an outsourcing or contract farming between them. But overall, the smallholder or family farms around the globe are problematic, and I'm not sure if I could say that cooperatives can provide, or a kibbutz system can provide the answer for that.
Yeah, I'm in touch with the great-grandson of Winston Churchill, and he's interested in getting high-quality cotton to make what he'll call Churchill fancy shirts. And I was wondering if Israel, if you see that as a possible source of high-quality cotton.
High-quality cotton as a...
To use to make shirts, very fancy shirts called Churchill shirts.
Well, I think cotton is used nowadays to do fancy shirts, be it from cotton in Egypt or otherwise. By the way, the International Cotton Forum sits in Washington, and all the agriculture are there. I think cotton is still a major commodity, and in some countries is definitely even handpicked, so it even gets a higher price. I think it is there in the industry, and there's a lot of competition or fight between the polyester fibers and the cotton, but it's still there. Cotton, I think it's
water issue. Cotton.
Yeah. Well, you mean in our case? Yes. Well, in our case, cotton was a much bigger sector. It used to have something like 250,000 dunams. We had to go down in Israel. It's coming up again a little bit because we had to take the water from cotton and put it and use it in much higher value crops. But now, because of the recycling of water and policy, which Israel is the highest in the world, about 70% of water that goes to agriculture is from recycled water, A grade, let's say, and it's definitely used for cotton, so it's in a way coming back. So cotton is definitely there, specifically in the kibbutz. In the kibbutz, because you need larger scale operations. Yes. Please.
When I was working on international agreements, I had 3 principles that I used: research, forestry, and water.
Forestry.
Oh, interesting. Because, as you know, forestry had become a very serious problem because they were just cutting everything down for fuel, for whatever. And so I noticed that prompted me to put forestry in my list of 3 things. It was because of the work that Israel was doing to sort of grow. I even planted a few trees on top of some of these rocky mounds that you had there. And you could see the difference between that in Israel and what was happening across the border in Jordan. Yeah, there was a clear difference.
Well, by the way, it still goes on a little bit, depends on the situation, but please.
Well, the other one was, it was my understanding that Israel has made an application to join the European Union. And if they have a number of agricultural regulations and requirements that are extremely difficult. And I thought perhaps you might have done some thinking about this before the application was made to the European Union to join it as an associate member. And I was wondering if you might have some comments on that.
Well, I should have mentioned, I think we have an agreement, long-term agreement with the EU. I don't think we are in a process at the moment, as far as I know, to become a full member of the EU, besides there are a lot of problems that are going on now. But we are in a very close relation with the EU agreement, first of all, commercially and otherwise. We also have a big research program that we are part of it as a full member. I think the biggest membership that we went through, it was last year, we became part of the OECD, which is actually in the club, to be in the club of the industrialized countries, and that definitely made a change, although it is not like you are part of a member. It maybe does to you something on the financial side that you can borrow in a little bit lower rate. But I think by being there, by the way, the agriculture sector received a very high mark, because one of the things that they are looking at, to what extent are you supporting your agriculture sector? And I think if you look at the comparisons to other countries, we are in a very low, so we got very high marks in compared to the other countries. So that's what happened recently.
I'd like to add a word about the research component. Israel has bought the right to participate in the big research program of the EU.
Right.
That and is now withdrawing to it back much more than it invested. So Israeli scientists are successful, very successful in this program. But there is a but to it, and I want to bring it up here. What happens is that the Israeli research power is slowly shifting from the United States, from being associated with the United States, to their European partners. This is a trend that worries us, the directors of the binational foundations. But it's not only us that are worried. After all, in the United States, there is much of the real, heavy, good, basic research and development programs. And the Israeli scientific power being shifting away from it should be a red light to the entire process. We are raising this point. We will now meet again with the ambassador of the United States to Israel, with the three binational foundations, and we'll point this out very clearly. This should be of concern to Israel as well as to the United States.
Yeah. By the way, I pulled this up. This is the policy indicators from the OECD joining to say, because we are talking also about research. If you take the other one, the agriculture sector has been benefiting from high levels of research and development. This is a very strong hallmark. This is quoting from the OECD report as receiving us becoming members. That's one. The other point is that we are really unique, and this is of interest for many developing countries. The land tenure system, it's still 94% of Israel's land tenure is owned by the state. It's owned by the people of Israel. So that on one hand, it looks very, very kind of... was that? Communistic. Yeah, I would say it looks very safety net that you don't distribute all your wealth. But those who are...
Yes, as a matter of fact, Minister, the Gini coefficient
In the OECD, the two highest are the USA and Israel. The Gini coefficient is the gap between.
Yeah. Okay, so that's. But on the other hand, you can say that those who are lawyers here or economists, you cannot use one of the biggest collaterals in agriculture, which is the land, for lending or giving it for finance it in order to capitalize on your land. So that's that part. But okay, this is how it goes. So just to mention, so we were definitely there. Let me just go back for a minute. I wanted to show you something more where we are. If you take in terms of economy, those who are interested, where is this here? This side. See the,
Here it is.
yeah. This is also from the OECD, where we are now located in terms of the economy. So of course these things are moving, but we are definitely there. So I would say that I think we are definitely very strong on applied research, very strong, would like to do international cooperation in business and looking how to cooperate with the big markets, and development in the US is definitely one of them. When it comes to agricultural produce, I want to say, and I'm handling it all the time, is the distance makes a problem, and the distance to move goods from one part of the world to the other part is a problematic one. You only can deal with commodities that are high value and high prices in order to pay for the transportation. So that's why I was saying we're looking east, definitely the US when it comes to research, and to other countries like Mexico. So, yes, please.
I mentioned I was involved in transportation.
Yeah, you mentioned Ashdod. My village is 10 minutes from Ashdod.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
But the point I'd like to make is, why are these big companies such as Maersk, why are they building these humongous big ships? And one of the reasons is that we just went through 7 billion people in the world. But in the next 40 years, over the next 40 years, we're going to grow to 9 billion people.
Yes.
And all of that plays in on the answer to Corinne's question, why do we go away from these little bitty farms? We can't possibly feed all these people in little bitty farms. It have to be on a mass production.
Large scale, yeah. Just to by the way, where are they built? These
China and South Korea.
And these are what, above 500,000 tons, or what kind of?
Let's look at containers, for example. The big ships we have right now take 12,000 containers. The ones that's coming are 18 to 20,000 containers.
Yeah.
And they have a 65-foot draft. And most of the harbors around the world are 45 feet. So there's only very special harbors that can handle those big ships.
Yeah. One more point, again, to share, because the small sector, the small family sector, comes up, especially when you talk with leadership who thinks about what to do, how to feed, is China and India. I think if you take India, that has around 400,000, 500,000 smallholders, that is probably considered one of the biggest challenges of India as an economy, that on one hand is flying up, but still 400,000 farmers are just smallholders. And we had very serious discussion with the ministers of agriculture of India, visiting also us. I don't think there's a clear answer, but again, technology and training. And in our perception was that if you take and you don't try to overtake them by large-scale farming, but try to maintain some of them or a lot of them in the system, was that if you only can find some ways, be it a better seed or better technology or some improved practices that should come from research-led solutions to the smallholders, this will just a 10 or 15% jump of output of these small farms will actually make a big difference in the food supply. This was, I'm sort of putting it together, this was some of the discussion that we had with India, including with China, seeing training and applied research / technology as a solution. It's not easy to do that. Most probably, this is the only answer to not to wipe out those millions that they haven't got any other alternative. But on the other hand, the same goes for Africa. But on the other hand, is if you can do that in some way, they will definitely change the food supply, definitely in their own continent and country, and probably make a change in the movement of goods. I'm not saying that we won't build the big ships. We should do that. And there's a lot of talk now of neo-colonialism, because if you look in Africa, what happens is the Chinese and the Indians are buying big chunks of land in order to do large-scale agriculture, and probably disappearing the others, and all will become workers or what have you. So these are really big challenges. Israel having a history of coming from small family farming and the kibbutzim, which are a bit larger but not that large, and still exist in the system. That's why I think we are a good partner of discussion, of thinking, and of optimizing the smallholders into some kind of support system that can take the farm produce from farm gate all the way to the market and still make a living, and the economy lives with it. And these are really big questions. Thank you. Please, Dr.
Comment. I'd like to add to your discussion about the small farmer, and I think that's still a very important component of everyone's agriculture. And in the U.S., despite their perceived inefficiency, and many times true inefficiency relative to the large-scale facilities, in the U.S., the greenhouse, the controlled environments have been rediscovered at that level, so-called high tunnel technology, again, brought from Europe. Much had been done in Israel on that as well. And this is beginning to change the 100% field agriculture in the small grower and allowing them to increase their economic situation. So I see that as a resurgence, and in fact, I'd like to talk to you about it. We'll be meeting later today about how education can help make this even more efficient. Better use of resources, locally grown products. The perishable vegetable crops can't be put in these container ships. Well, they can, but they don't come out
do too well.
very well.
They want to run the trip. Yes.
So I'm encouraged as a researcher and as an academic and also experienced grower myself in what the small grower can do with low technology, low energy input greenhouses.
Sure.
On the small farm.
Thank you very much. By the way, I'm fully with you. I think there was a recent report by the USDA that there are 2.2 million farms in the U.S., which is from the very small one all the way to the big ones. The big ones are only about 5 or 6 or 10%. So it is definitely, even in the context of, I was surprised, this is completely with what you're saying, Professor, that the smallholder is very much a player, although he might not draw all his income from farming activity. But he is a player, and he is rural America like he is rural Israel in our case. Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.